What is up guys, it's Solam here, back with another Season of Mastery video. Today we'll take a look at the class meta from OG Classic WoW, and talk about how it might be changing for Classic WoW Fresh, aka Season of Mastery. The first thing we have to ask ourselves is why the meta might change, and to answer that quickly before we move further into the video, we have some changes that we know are coming to Season of Mastery that will at least stir up the meta. So first of all, raids are becoming more difficult through increased boss health. Raids are also becoming more difficult through the restoration of old boss mechanics that was in earlier versions of the raid, but was since removed from the game. Raids are also becoming more difficult through the sense of our characters becoming weaker as a result of not being able to use world buffs inside raids. I've gone through the world buffs before, and I'm sure you are all familiar with them from Classic WoW, but basically we had a bunch of world buffs increasing our attack power, health points and critical strike rating, and basically most of our main stats. Some classes benefited more from these world buffs than others, which we will get into further in this video as well. Last but not least, the debuff limit on raid bosses, or enemy mobs in general, is now being removed, which allows for more debuffs. This means that warlocks can now take full advantage of their damage over time abilities, paladins will be able to keep 100% uptime on their unleashed seals, and hunters will be able to use Serpent Sting, although that might actually be a DPS decrease and waste of mana in some cases. The point is, we have many different changes coming to the raiding scene of Season of Mastery that at least has the possibilities of stirring up the meta a little bit. So with that being said, let's tackle these changes one by one. But before we do that, we gotta thank today's sponsor. Dragon City is a free-to-play game available both on Android and iOS. In Dragon City you can collect over 1,000 different dragons and build your own dragon empire. And you can breed 2 dragons to get a new one, hatch them and feed them. You can train your dragons and take them to battle in order to make them more powerful, and there are different PvP modes that let you fight against your friends and challenge other dragon masters. Click the link in the description to download Dragon City, and for the next 7 days, new users who download the game through the link in the description will also get a special free reward containing 15,000 food, 30,000 gold and 10 gems. So make sure you check out Dragon City through the link in the description and start building your dragon empire today. Back to the video though, let's talk about some Season of Mastery changes. First of all, raid bosses are getting an increased health pool. This means longer boss fights, which also means that classes that rely heavily on short boss fights for burst DPS will be screwed, and classes that went out of mana quickly in OG Classic WoW will be even more screwed, as they will go out of mana just as quick this time around, and with more boss health and longer boss fight encounters, this means that he will go out of mana way before the fight ends. This instantly eliminates certain meme classes and meme specs from entering the meta, such as boomkins who can now finally take advantage of their moonfire, and also insect swarm damage over time effects, but this doesn't really help when they go out of mana 10% into the boss fight. This next change is a bit more up in the air, and that is the restoration of old boss mechanics. This one actually has great potential, it just depends on which boss mechanics are being restored. Many of the changes to vanilla raids are undocumented in the patch notes, therefore it is difficult to think of all of the boss mechanics that at one time used to be available, and if they restore boss mechanics that are very punishing for melee characters, we could see an entire meta switch from melee stacking to range stacking just based on that. This is something we have seen a lot in many World of Warcraft expansions, where boss abilities are just way too punishing for melee characters, and even if those melee classes theoretically can deal more DPS, it is still favorable to stack range classes, instead just to be able to avoid those mechanics. Next up, and this is the big one, no world buffs inside raids. That is right, this time around you will not be able to use world buffs inside raids. Some people love this, others hate it. Either way it's happening, and this will affect certain classes, warriors, more than others. As a warrior, you could get plus 140 attack power from the Dragon Slayer world buff, as well as 5% crit, and by stacking that with Fengus Ferocity, you already had plus 340 attack power total. Further stacking that with the Songflower world buff, and you had plus 10% baseline critical strike as well. Add the Sandalar buff on top of that, for the plus 15% stat as well, and you had insane gains from the world buffs alone. As a warrior, you benefited heavily from that baseline critical strike gain, as you have a talent in the Fury talent tree called Flurry, which basically increase your attack speed by 10% for 3 hits after hitting a critical strike, meaning the higher crit you had, the more uptime you would have on flurry, the faster you would hit, and the more damage you would deal. That being said, the warriors aren't the only class that benefited from world buffs. Pretty much every melee character benefited a lot from world buffs, as they were incredibly geared towards melee characters, giving them both 340 attack power in total, as well as plus 10% baseline crit, but warriors are the only class that had a talent that made them benefit a little extra from it. Theoretically, rogues had a similar talent called Seal of Fate, or Seal Fate, which every time they crit with a combo point generating ability, it would add an additional combo point, but this talent is so far down in the assassination tree that rogues would usually not use it anyway. The fact that world buffs will not be in Season of Mastery means that classes that benefited heavily from them will theoretically be nerfed and might end up being played less, opening up for a new meta. This brings me to my last point, which is the fact that the debuff limit is being removed. This benefits pretty much every class in one way or another. For example, warriors will now be able to proc their Deep Fear Wounds effect more accurately, which is actually a DPS increase for warriors. Warlocks will be able to keep corruption up on all targets, which is actually huge. Paladins can have 100% uptime on, for example, Seal of Wisdom for mana regen, and Shadow Priests can use their damage over time abilities to actually deal damage this time around. So let's look at warriors first. Warriors will be able to more accurately proc their Deep Wounds effect, which is a bleed effect over time procced from critical strikes, meaning warriors might be changing their entire spec around from their flurry spec from classic WoW to a Mortal Strike Deep Wound spec, or they could also go for Deep Wound Impale and then shift over to Fury with the remaining talent points. Warlocks will be able to keep corruptions up on target, which will be incredibly valuable in dungeons, as the more corruptions you have up, the more often you will proc your Nightfall talent, which gives you an instant cast Shadow Bolt. This will also be useful in raids, especially boss fights with multi-dotting available, such as, for example, Major Domo Executus in Molten Core. Shadow Priest also has a talent called Shadow Weaving, which will increase shadow damage taken by anyone affected by that debuff by up to 15%, so I could see a potential raiding meta, where you stack as many warlocks as possible, throw one Shadow Priest in there for that debuff, and then just spam corruptions and shadow bolts all over the place. That being said though, even with world buffs being disabled in raids, the fact that warriors can now take advantage of their Deep Wounds talent means that warriors aren't really getting nerfed to the ground, and they will most likely still be at the top of their ranks. But if nothing else, all of these changes will help and make it a little bit closer on the DPS meters, as the warriors most likely will not be doing 2.5k DPS, while all the other classes do 20% of that DPS. It is going to be a much closer race this time around, and these changes serve as some type of class balance mechanic. Personally, I expect there to be a lot more warlocks inside raids this time around, and a lot less warriors, and possibly more rogues, especially in the early phases of Season of Mastery. I think as time goes on you will see more and more warriors, as warriors are pretty gear dependent, so you will definitely see more warriors in phase 6 than you will in phase 1. Either way, that is pretty much it guys. I think it's fun to speculate on the class metas and how it will evolve over time, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think the class meta will look like in Season of Mastery, and if you want more Season of Mastery content, make sure you subscribe as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.